Are you unknowingly kinking the metaphorical hose of the current of your life force energy by repressing or avoiding different elements of your humanity? Today I want to talk about the ways in which we can open up our life force energy, our flow, by diving into our own humanity, our shadow, our imperfections, and bringing those back into the wholeness of who we are, and how that opens us up to have more creative flow in our life, how that opens us up more to the flow of our natural energy, our wild nature. My name is Natalie with the Wild Nature Channel, and this channel is all about providing you with empowering tools, perspectives, resources to really support in the unfolding of the truth of who you are, coming back home to your wholeness through peeling back the layers of conditioning, programming, stories, and whatever it is that has been holding you back from really embodying the wild nature of who you are. And this metaphor came to me while I was in a master plant dieta in the Shipibo tradition with the master plant Morosa, a visionary plant. And there was something that was arising for me at the time. I was feeling some frustration around a friend of mine, and there was a certain element that I kept finding myself looping around. And it was their approach to trying to rid themselves of different aspects of their humanity. So they would say, oh, jealousy, I've extracted that. I've gotten rid of that. Envy, greed, I've dealt with that. I've gotten rid of it. I've pulled it out. Lust, whatever it may be, these pieces, that's not a problem for me anymore because I've extracted it from my being. And this metaphor came through to me. When we aim to extract these inherent parts of our humanity, it's like having a hose that's been kinked up by imbalances in how we express these different energies inside of our energy body. And these kinks are what are stopping the flow from moving the currents in the way that they're meant to, so that we can be in our freest and fullest expression. And when I thought about extracting, I thought about the band-aid of trying to solve the problem. Oh, well, instead of just unkinking the hose by bringing my awareness to it, what if we just cut the kink? What would happen if we cut the kink of the hose? Everything explodes everywhere. There's no direction, there's no current, there's no natural flow of how things begin to move. And this is a beautiful metaphor for the shadow, because this is exactly what happens when we try to extract or repress or avoid these different aspects of ourselves, is we are trying to cut the hose. And when we cut the hose, that energy of what it is we're trying to remove or avoid or repress, that energy doesn't go away, but it lashes out. It begins to be more out of our control, being a driving force. And Carl Jung has a beautiful quote. He says, "Till we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our life and we will call it fate." And this is his view of the shadow. The shadow is the unconscious. It's these elements of our humanity that we have pushed down because been taught that they're not likable, they're not acceptable, that we can't receive love from them. And what happens when we do this is elements of our humanity, energy doesn't go away. These energies of our innate humanness, they stay with us. And when we push it down, then it begins to act on its own accord. So this cutting of the hose, when we push something down or try to rip that part of the hose out, then it begins to act behind the scenes. It begins to act when we're triggered. It begins to act by saying things that we don't mean, or in acting in ways that later we say, oh, that was so unlike me. That's the shadow emerging. It also emerges in the judgments and projections that we have towards other people, and the way that we approach those judgments or perspectives or projections, the way that we approach our triggers. And it'll continue to do this until we see, like, hey, I'm seeing there's a kink in the hose. Well, I'm trying to cut it off, but then the water's just going to go everywhere. And then I won't be able to contain it. I can't build a relationship with the flow of my inner currents. And when we begin to do the shadow work, when we begin to cultivate a deeper awareness of our unconscious, of these elements of ourselves that we have suppressed or hidden away, then it's like a slow opening up of that kink to allow for the currents of our life force to start to flow with more ease. And I'll just do a quick dive into the shadow, just in case anyone listening to this isn't familiar with what that is. Shadow is any part of us that we have repressed, denied, or rejected. And this begins before we even have conscious awareness that we are doing so. And it's a protection mechanism. So even as infants, we start to pick up on the messages from the world around us. If I do this, then I receive love. If I do this, I don't receive love. And when we're children, it's a survival mechanism. You know, if we receive love, if we receive care, which is a necessary element of our survival, is human connection. We are communal beings. But it's also an element of survival. Well, if I don't receive love, then maybe I won't get fed. I'll get pushed away. I could possibly die if I don't have human touch. These are all things in the background that we're not consciously aware of when we're infants or toddlers or at those younger ages. And so this begins at a very young age that we start to shove things down into the shadow, into the unconscious. And when we shove those different elements down, we're also shoving down any and all of the gifts that may be tied with those shadow elements. And so this is where the unkinking of the hose can be really beautiful to start to open you up more to the flow and the current of first your life force energy, but also the flow and the current of life itself. Begin to be more open to life. And I'll just give a couple examples. For me, rage is an element that I had pushed down into the shadow for many, many years of my life. This inner fire. And I've spoken to rage in a deeper sense in a few of my other videos if you want to revisit those. But rage, this inner fire, it can be harmful. There is a shadow element to it. You know, it can lash out. It can be aggressive. It can say hurtful things that hurt other people. But it is also tied to motivation, to drive, to being able to set boundaries, to discernment. It's a catalyzing energy that allows you to be the driving force of your creative energy, allows you to choose and actually step forth on the path of this is what I'm here for. There's a confidence to it on the other side too. And that brings up another shadow, arrogance. Maybe there's an element of arrogance that really triggers you. And there can be overexpressed shadow, and usually people who are actually overtly arrogant is because they haven't come into balance with and actually accepted that part of themselves. And that's the cutting of the hose where the arrogance is just like spraying everywhere. But the flip side of arrogance is confidence. If someone that you see is arrogant really triggers you, it's because there's an element of yourself that hasn't allowed that arrogance, or the gift of arrogance, which is a deeper confidence and trust in oneself. And that's more of the gift of that frequency. And when we shove one thing down, we shove the other thing down. And so we close ourselves off to these different facets of who we are. And when we do so, the hose can only take so much pressure, whether it's kinked or whether you're trying to cut it off. It can only take so much pressure until it needs to release. And I guess my question for you is, do you want to have the agency and autonomy and choice of how that pressure, how that flow emerges into the world? Or do you want it consistently running behind the scenes, directing your life, and you calling it fate, starting to point your fingers at the world around you? This is always happening to me. This person did this. Or being able to bring back the energy and saying, hey, this is an element of myself that I haven't accepted. Maybe I should look at the ways that this person's boundaries or selfishness is actually showing to me the ways that I haven't allowed myself to be selfish or have self-care. put myself first and set boundaries for what I know that I need. And so this metaphor of unkinking the hose, I find a really beautiful way to look at and bring more of a story element to this importance of coming back to wholeness, of looking at the things that might not always be comfortable to look at. But the benefit of doing so is you start to release the pressure and you open up the flow. And when you do that, you'll find maybe more creativity, more drive. You'll feel like more of yourself. You feel like you can show up in a place and not constantly be worried about other people's judgments, or not constantly be pointing fingers and having your own judgments. It just begins to open up the flow of life, your deep inner gifts, and how your soul was meant to emerge into this world as this multifaceted, beautiful, unique blueprint that you are, rather than trying to siphon off different parts of yourself to fit into a mold that someone else created for you that you weren't meant to fit in. And so I hope that you find some inspiration to start looking at maybe the little areas of your life that you have these kinks in your energetic hose that are blocking you, that are stopping the flow of your wholeness from returning to your heart, to your being. And I have a few other videos that you can reference as well. Difference between fitting in and belonging, as well as my belonging workshop, which is also really supportive and goes a little bit deeper into the shadow elements. So feel free to visit those videos. And if you liked this metaphor, this journey, this story of reclaiming your power, of unkinking the hose and allowing that life force energy to flow back into your being, into your wholeness, I would love your support through hitting that thumbs up button, commenting if anything resonated with you, and sharing with anyone you think might need to hear this. And as always, subscribe to my channel for more empowering content, and I will see you next time.